Thoughts on Steven Crowder's new look? Oh, fuck. I didn't even need to shave my goddamn beard, bro. He doesn't even look like me no more. He tweeted the word drama, and I clicked as fast as I could. What did I miss? Nothing yet. Here we go. Blast off. Blasting off. Blasting off. Blast on off. Put on weight. I think he's doing like steroids or some shit. Here, what is this? Let's watch this. Came true. Guess she gave you things. Make him even more atheisty. Atheists defy him 10x. Keep his current look but add a fedora is Science Miss Eve. Depict this scene where a gaggle of hot chicks are thanking him for explaining how God isn't real. Wait. How God isn't explaining how God isn't a good call. He's imagining this while practicing his katana routine in the garage. Why are they Japanese? Because he's libertarian. Reddit atheism is libertarianism packaged in a new way, and libertarians automatically have Chinese wives or Japanese wives. They're all Asian. They're libertarian guys with Asian wives is the meta. I like how like it looks like he has synthol in his arms though. Render him completely baffled when after death he finds himself in hell rather than in science and peer-reviewed studies. Yeah. A couple things make me hope that I'm just entirely wrong and like God is real and hell is real. One of them is obviously people like, you know, evil monsters that just do so much harm to others. Like, I hope hell is real and they suffer, right? But then the other reason is because it'll be really funny seeing all the Reddit atheists that are so fucking annoying be like, oh no, I was wrong. I was wrong this entire time. It's like, bro, whatever. Fuck it. I'll sit there. Because I'm going there. You know what I mean? I know I'm going there. You have actually helped me with the Palestinian conflict. I hope reincarnation is real. I want some do-overs. That's not how reincarnation works, though. Like, if you were shit, you get reincarnated as, like something stupid. Like the bug that carries around poop. Right? Isn't that how that works? Like, you get downgraded until you inevitably, like, get reincarnated into being, like... What is it? What is it? Like, you just keep getting upgraded. You keep getting upgraded, and then, like, ultimately what? Like, you get reincarnated as, like, what, Brad Pitt, and then it's like you're closer to Nirvana than anybody else. Yeah, like, if you're a Twitch streamer, this chatter is correct. Let's say you're a Twitch streamer, okay, and then you've been a bad boy. You've been a bad Twitch streamer. You die, you get reincarnated into a Facebook streamer. And then you've been a bad boy, you get reincarnated into... What's worse than a Facebook? I mean, a kick streamer. You've been a bad boy even more than that. You get reincarnated into Rumble. You get a TikTok creator stuck at 200, 300 views per video. I thought cows are supposed to be top tier. I'm not trying to be racist. I'm not sure if that was racist, but it feels like there's a whole cow thing. Is it? Why would a cow be top tier globally? When cows are like... fucking globally, they're getting murked. Yeah, maybe if you're a cow in India. Yeah. If you're a cow in India, like, shit's kind of pog, right? You get to chill on the road. Nobody moves you around. You know? But, like, if you're a cow... Like, the only place outside of India where cows are being treated like holy beings is those TikTok farms, okay? Where they have, like, the prettiest cows I've ever seen. They sometimes pop up on my For You page. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these cows. I don't know if y'all have seen these cows. Like, they're so beautiful. It, like, blows my mind how beautiful these goddamn cows are, where they're just, like, handsome. Right? They're just pretty. They got, like, hair. I feel like they get hair supplements and shit. Anyway, I saw them eating pumpkin pie. Like, I saw a lady in this fucking cow farm. I saw this last night. I saw a lady in this cow farm giving their cows pumpkin pie. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. And it's like, bro, if you're living La Vida Loca, my man. Like, what the hell is this? Look. This is the one place outside of India where cows are being treated so well. Surprising our spoiled cows with pumpkin pie. Also, look at how rizzed up these cows are. Like, I feel like you let these cows out into the real world, they're fucking your cowgirl, okay? These cows, they're going to steal the other cows' boyfriends, 100%. Like, look at this hair. Or does it not work that way? I wonder what it works like. I wonder how that works in the cow world. You know what I mean? Steam Deck Remote Play is no longer available, huh? Also, isn't this kind of like, I guess, I mean, pumpkin pie has like milk in it, no? But I guess like cows drink milk, right? I wonder why you're wondering this shit. I'm just saying, like, you're in the cow world, you're in the cow universe, okay? You're fucking mooing around. You're the goat. Well, not the goat, you're the cow. You're the big cow in the playpen. And then all of a sudden one of these fuckboys come rolling around and it's like the Timothy Chalamet cow. You know what I mean? All the other cows are like, what the fuck? What the hell is this shit? All the other cows are now like, damn, this cow's hot as hell. So this is what I mean. Do they care about this? Do they care about like how fluffy their hair is and stuff? Or are they just like, I don't really give a fuck. You're not throwing it down like that. You're not. Timothy Chalamet. Like, look at this. It's so unfair, bro. It's so unfair. Most of the cows out there are just like slammed into these densely packed areas only to get pushed into the fucking meat grinder and come out of the other side McDonald's hamburger patty. Meanwhile, these fucking cows this one looks goth, you're right. Dude, I'm just saying, these are the type of things I thought about last night when I saw this on my TikTok for you. Dude, what's happening to our cows? Back in the day, cows used to have dreams. Cows used to stand for something. Nowadays, our cows look like they're TikTok Zoomers. What's going on? These cows, they do not have any jagged edges. They have soft hands. Our cows are no longer pretend the people who hate you just for being attractive. I don't think people just hate me for being attractive. I think they hate me for other reasons. For good reasons. I'm a bad person. I mean, this is crazy, dude. Ever since Austinox made Hasanox, you've been slowly spreading more vegan propaganda. What's up with that? What, vegan propaganda is like showing you an animal being cute that is not immediately ready for like consumption? That's what vegan propaganda is? Cows just want high-speed rail, too. NJ Transit rail service is subject to up to a 45-minute delay between Newark Penn and PSNY due to police activity near Newark Penn Station. Oh, my God. Look how fucking dog shit this station looks like. NJ Transit rail tickets pass between Cross, Honored by Path, and Hoboken. Police activity. So, yeah, it's just like, it's disgusting, dude. It's so, ugh. I mean, look. Having the fucking Longhorn in there ruining transit is like obviously what immediately people hyper focus on, and they think like, wow, that's crazy. Like, how did that happen? I immediately look at how disgusting this train station looks like. What the fuck? Soviet era train station knows the US. First of all, how dare you desecrate the good name of Soviet era train stations? Soviet era train stations are fucking incredible. Look at Ukraine. They double as bomb shelters. They got like fucking chandeliers and shit down there. It's crazy. It's crazy nice. Ukraine has like the GDP of Alabama on a good day before the invasion, and their public transit was infinitely better than ours. There's a lot of things you could say about the USSR and the Soviets in general, but they cared a lot about a lot of these amenities. These are the types of amenities, especially in like areas where there was a lot of population density. A couple things you can't shit on with like socialist countries is obviously don't ask them about like how they're treating religious practice and stuff, or how they maintain like some kind of ethnic homogeny, right? But one thing you can't shit on them is like literacy rates and fucking public amenities that they work very hard to keep well. Don't ask the Soviets what happened to the Tatars, but or whether or not you can practice Islam. However, ask the Soviets about the fucking train stations all day. They will show you. Can't expect people to respect the public space if we can't respect people enough to build and maintain something that provides dignity. You could try the Bukele approach, referencing the Greeks making public spaces nicer than private space for the anti-commies. I don't think they care. I think people just see. I think people see public transit as like gross. Ew, I need to be next to the poors. I'm around. I need to be around like homeless people. Fuck that. And it's like weird because homeless people use public transit partially because they have no like valid fucking alternatives for shelter, temporary or permanent, right? So it's like this problem that is baked into the structure in and of itself. Can we get to hentai reacts where there is live Haas reaction to X-ray vision impregnation? I'm not gonna lie. At first, I thought not a big deal. Probably people are exaggerating with respect to like the art, the art nudity drama. Okay, and then I realized, no, it's actually not overblown at all. People saw the meta, and people saw that Twitch was making it like, Twitch was making it permissible. And they're maxing out on this shit, dude. They are maxing out. Like in ways that I did not think was even possible. There was a fucking hentai drawing stream at the top of the leaderboard earlier this morning. Someone was doing an 18+ hentai drawing stream. I have a question. What do you have against Persians, or is it just a joke? I'm new here, but as a history college professor, Persia was the shit in the ancient world, way better than the Greeks or Ottomans. Okay, it is a joke. Duh. It's a fucking holdover from when my roommate, when I first started, my roommate was Persian, well, Iranian, and we used to joke about it all the time. I would tell him like it was like a weird fake beef that we had where we would talk about how the Ottoman Empire is better than the Persian Empire. Will Neff showed his doll's titties last night. Lol, hilarious. There's a legit nude thumbnail in the recommended stream section. Yeah, I don't know what's happening right now, but it is definitely crazy. Here is Asmongold hitting a fucking hot take. He said, Twitch isn't and has never been a safe space for underage people. Everyone fixates on boob streamers, but the reality is many Twitch streamers cover topics and have conversations that would be wildly inappropriate for minors to be involved in. New Twitch changes are a W. Twitch also is not necessarily a platform for minors in general. If you look at, I remember, I don't know if it was Casey Tron who was actually posting the overarching like numbers. It's kind of sad when you think about it, but Twitch is actually a much older platform than you would suspect. A lot of people think like, oh, people are watching Ninja play Fortnite. And that's like, that might have been true, but the Twitch platform actually aged. The platform aged across the board. Maybe like when Twitch was in its heyday with the Fortnite stuff, a lot of those people were like 13, 14. But that at this point is like 6 years ago, right? The reality of the matter is YouTube, unironically, is a much younger platform. TikTok is obviously the youngest of the platforms as far as like their main audiences. Twitch, on the other hand, pretty old. You see a lot of people behave as though they are young, and you assume that that's the case. But the age demographics of Twitch users, the largest demographic is the 18 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 32-year-olds is the second largest. And this breakdown is pretty similar to what my audience looks like as well. Do you not think the numbers are fake? Kids aren't exactly signing up to websites to say that they're 15 or whatever. No, of course. Of course. So that is the nature of the beast, though. That is just how the internet works. That is the nature of the beast. Obviously, no matter what age you are, you're also going to be able to find a way around censorship and the safeguards that you have to go directly and watch porn, right? Online. That's just the reality of the situation. And I myself have thought about what the impact of that might be on a younger audience in general, because I don't know. I didn't grow up in a fucking, unrestricted access to porn period that I could just like access from my phone. When I was in my more formative years, when I was growing up, porn was actually very restricted, maybe too restricted, as a matter of fact. I think that there's a delicate balance there. But having said that, that's just like straight pornography that every child can have access to online immediately and with ease. Whereas like as far as the people being terrified of Twitch demographics in general, especially when this is like at its peak. Take a look at this data detailing Twitch's age demographics in 2020. I wonder where Casey Tron got this information from, but Myth was 16, 17 when he started streaming Fortnite. The kids grew up. Kids nowadays watch TikTok that's full of twerking and ladies fully not clothed. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely broad availability and mass access to all matter of different types of vices online. And I think it's up to the platforms to try to control it as best as they possibly can. But obviously, it's never going to be perfect. And there are certainly going to be young people online that are lying about their age, and that's going to happen. But the goal for platforms in general is supposed to, the goal in general for platforms is to ensure that they are, they're taking the necessary precautions and making sure that there is like very little. There are very little rule breakers, but of course there are going to be people that break the rules. It's like seatbelts. Any manner of regulation, you write the laws for the dumbest person in mind, or for the most vulnerable population in mind in general, right? But then there are still going to be people that break those rules and violate the law. However, the goal is to ensure that most people follow it. Most people will, most people don't want to be bothered. As far as I would say vices goes, I've mentioned this already, but as far as vices goes, like sexual content, softcore content, sex work of like a much lighter variety is nowhere near as bad a vice. Like I said, or as is unrestricted, unfettered access to like all matter of hardcore pornography, because it is a gray area as far as like what is damaging to the psyche, because I feel like there is definitely, it's a cultural phenomena. In America, we are very puritanical. This kind of cultural phenomena doesn't actually, this kind of cultural phenomena surrounding nudity does not exist in European countries, right? Does that make sense? Do you guys understand what I mean? Like, for example, there is literally straight up porno, like pornographic material that you can watch on television in after certain hours. We talked about this on the latest episode of the podcast. Like RTL, a German channel, is one of the channels that I would watch to see boobies back in the day. So there's definitely, we definitely have like a more outdated approach to nudity and pornography. We're way more puritanical. It's super damaging, not really making sense. Bad take, sorry. Porn fucks up young people's brains. I wouldn't be mad if it was all banned all around. It's going to bring more porn brain rot, men and boys. Yeah, I think as far as pornographic material being readily available does contribute to the harm, but the harm is not being done by the porn, if that makes sense. I think that this has been a persistent take of mine on this issue. It's just that the issue starts not with pornography, but instead with patriarchy. The issue starts with a lack of sex ed and appropriate avenues to have these kinds of conversations. And the cultural phenomena of being incredibly puritanical and wanting to control women's bodies specifically. Like, these are all of the major factors. And that's precisely the reason why sexual violence existed before readily available pornographic material. As a matter of fact, it was probably higher, if I'm not mistaken. I've looked at some of these numbers, and since we've tracked things like this, the access to pornography has not directly contributed to more sexual violence, even though it is a correlation and certainly not a causation. There's no causal effect regardless. But you could not say the exact opposite even. Like, you can't say that readily, like, mass consumption and ready availability to pornographic material has led to a spike in sexual violence. Hypocrite? What do you mean? The problem also is that a lot of the information that you have on this subject unfortunately comes from, and this is a Utah State University study, which is what I was going to mention. Unfortunately, and I haven't seen this one yet, but a lot of the studies are actually backed by secular seeming institutions that are actually just Mormon institutions or hyper religious institutions that are funding studies like this. And the studies themselves are like, the studies themselves are usually very wonky. Christian groups are super anti-sex work. And they've figured out that if you attach Christianity to your anti-sex work research, people go, no. So they actually find a way to make themselves seem non-Christian or secular or even progressive, as a matter of fact, in order to sell the idea. But usually it is a lot of the, like, porn corrupts people's brains or whatever comes from, it oftentimes comes from, very religious and very puritanical approaches. So overall, I think the problem is if they don't clearly label their method. I mean, we're talking about straight up pornography now, right? We are talking about straight up hardcore pornography and the ready access to straight up pornography that you can consume as someone under the age of 18, which I do think is probably not good. I don't think that it's good. Like, immediately, my opinion is having that much easy to access gratifying material, if that's like what you're seeking out, is never going to be a good thing. There needs to be some safeguards on things like that. I don't know what the best methods are. I will readily admit that. However, sexual violence, specifically sexual violence against women, has certainly predated pornographic content in general. And another good example is, yes, a Turkish chatter pointed this out, but there's no porn in Turkey. Porn is not available. You get banned. Like, every pornographic site is banned across the board in Turkey. And yet, do you think that there is no violence against women in Turkey? Do you think that there's no sexual violence against women in Turkey? Do you think that there's no, like, misogyny still persists? It only contributes to sexual repression. People say VPN, but the average person, like, this is also a ridiculous thing, because any kind of hurdle you place in front of something is going to cause a lot of people to not access it at all. You have to understand this. You've been online. Even the age checkbox immediately knocks out a big chunk of people. I know it doesn't stop everyone, and of course it's still not like a very successful method at all, but it still stops people from accessing it because people don't want to be bothered. Security theater works in that regard. Security theater, for example, is not actually there to genuinely stop perpetrators of violence. Like, the TSA is not there to legitimately stop acts of terror. They actually have a very low success rate on that. The real acts of terror that they stop is the potential, like the potential acts of terror that people might engage with that they don't, because it's just too difficult, or they think it's too difficult. So the problem is because America likes to burn the candle from both ends in every single circumstance, and I'll give you an analogy to abortion, right? If your goal is to limit the number of abortions that people get, then you should literally do sex ed. But Americans don't want to do sex ed, and they want to stop people from having abortions at the same time, which then doesn't stop abortions at all. It just causes back alley abortions, which are harmful to women. Hundreds of thousands of women actually end up becoming infertile as a consequence of the issues that persist in back alley abortions. And the situation is identical to sexuality. Well, one, because the major vector of why this kind of conversation occurs in America and the way that it occurs is the same. It's controlling women's bodies, bodily autonomy, and also like a patriarchal approach. It's a weird Catholic Dark Ages holdout that we have persisted for some weird reason. We've continued for some weird reason here in the United States of America, despite not being a overwhelmingly Catholic nation. Does that make sense? So what do? If the goal of banning pornography truly is for children to develop healthily and have healthy relationships with sex and sexuality, okay? Then you're supposed to do sex ed. That's it. But the very same puritanical attitude that says we have to ban pornography, we have to ban the sexualization of women, and this is done from multiple different avenues in America, especially. You have people that want to ban porn feministly. You have people that want to ban sexualization, even if people are doing it on their own volition. You have people doing that from a reactionary point of view. Well, most of it is reactionary, in my opinion, but you also have people that want to ban it from a progressive point of view as well, right? It's a very interesting phenomena. And the irony is that if your overarching goal isn't necessarily to just simply ban porn because you hate it, but the real reason why you want to ban porn is because you think it contributes negatively to people's development, okay? Their development of their sexuality and their understanding of sex in general, then you shouldn't be even touching porn, really. The real problem to tackle in that regard would not be pornography, but it would be sex ed. Very interesting. Very interesting phenomena. And then, once you actually do engage with the subject matter, once you do actually have sex ed in schools, for example, and then if there are still problems that persist, then you move on to the entertainment factor. Does that make sense? If the government implements China, Turkey-style restriction on porn, Twitter will bitch about it. USA doing the opposite. Twitter is still bitching about it. Pick a fucking side. Yeah, well, because most people just want to bitch. Yeah, also banning porn causes ethical and not ethical porn to be hosted on the same sites. Yes. Before we continue on with this conversation, of course, I have to repeat something that maybe most people are not very aware of, right? And that is, there's a difference between porn, sex work, and also sex trafficking. One is something that an adult can consent to doing, okay? There's still, of course, the coercive conditions of capitalism that persist behind the background of every action that we take, no matter what. However, that is across the board. That is for every single human being. That is the same coercive conditions that lead people into going and working at McDonald's, right? But people always conflate, when it comes to sex work, people always conflate sex trafficking with sex work. There are still plenty of women who, on their own volition, and plenty of men who, on their own volition, want to do sex work. They like it, they enjoy it, they think it's fun, and they like making money off of it. Right? Sex trafficking, on the other hand, is, of course, horrifying, illegal, and the government should put an end to it as best as they can. The idea that trafficking enables sex work is actually completely incorrect. If you talk to any sex workers, and not like former sex workers who are now reactionarily anti-sex work, they will tell you that, as a matter of fact, actual regulation surrounding it, or decriminalization in general, is how you allow organizations to focus on rule breakers and not the overwhelming majority of people that actually engage in it in a consensual manner. If you make the entirety illegal, then people who are doing something consensually that most people consume and enjoy is just as illegal as the other stuff that everybody understands is fucking completely impermissible, completely illegal, morally unjustifiable, horrifying. That's it. And motherfuckers think they're brave for that very normal take of like sex trafficking is bad when they make movies shouting about how they're exposing some secret. Yeah, exactly. What do you think of the take that every John is a rapist because sex under coercive conditions is rape? Sorry if you replied to this already. I had to take a phone call. Yeah, that stems from like pretty basic lack of fundamentals on actually listening to sex workers, and instead approaching the subject matter by listening to people that have reactionary opinions on sex work in general, because obviously the coercion under capitalism is always going to exist no matter what. However, it treats sex workers as though they're like little children, and it infantilizes them. It treats sex workers that like they have no capacity to fucking make these decisions, and it also forgets the other side of consent, which is enthusiastic consent versus consent in general, which is something that sex workers talk about all the time, as a matter of fact, and have been for years and years and years. There are different boundaries when you talk about sex work. Do you have any pro-sex work book recs? Not necessarily. Stop dunking on random Twitter users in chat, you weirdos. Yeah, don't do that. This is, of course, a very difficult conversation to have. It's one of those issues. It's one of those issues that is very similar to like talking about criminal justice reform, specifically as it pertains to like prisoners' rights. Prisoners' rights is a very contentious subject to talk about in the United States of America, due to the fact that we have an incredibly draconian culture towards crime and punishment. So we want to fucking like literally kill everyone and anyone that has wronged people. And therefore, any single time when I approach the matter and start trying to talk about prisoners as though they're full-blown human beings, and swing people's opinions towards a more rehabilitative approach to criminal justice, there are a lot of people, even in leftist communities, that are very progressive on every other issue that just drop it entirely. Sex work is similar to that as well. Where I think that our overarching puritanical approach to sex and sex work in general comes from it comes from like the American fundamentals. You talk about sex workers who have the privilege to pick their customers. The most female sex workers are used by misogynist men. They think they can buy the body of a woman. And also, this is the other part of the conversation that completely avoids talking about like anyone else other than sex work. This is why I say it's like an inherently misogynistic phenomena, because it's like doing patriarchy but from the opposite end, because it literally talks about it from the boundaries of like women being victims under sex work. You know, it's just, it only talks about like women not having any agency. You're talking about sex workers who have the privilege to pick up their customers. Now, this is a great conversation to have. A big part of the reason why women don't have the privilege to pick their customers is because sex work is criminalized in this country unconditionally, which means that the same access that you could have to certain amenities that you have in other workplaces, you do not have for sex work. For example, I've talked about this quite a bit back in the day with what was it? Was it called FOSSA? Was it FOSSA and SESTA and FOSSA? The bill that basically made it so that there were no more ads for sex work on FOSTA and SESTA. Yeah, this was a bill back in the day that implemented severe punishments on featuring any kind of sex work on your advertisement sections, and it was sold as a sex trafficking law to knowingly facilitate and support sex trafficking, and which is always how these things are sold. And many sex workers advocated against this because you can't say, like, most people understand that if you sell it as like we want to ban pornography unconditionally, or we want to ban sex work unconditionally, people are going to say, oh, that's bullshit. That's like some right-wing reactionary bullshit. But which is why most people sell it as a provision to combat sex trafficking, right? And many people understand this phenomena when it comes to other right-wing framings on issues like pro-life versus pro-choice, right? When Republicans sell the idea of abortion, they don't sell it as like we want to take away women's bodily autonomy. They sell it as we're pro-life, and actually a fetus is a real life. Life begins at conception. But when you have a susceptibility to succumb to right-wing framing on an issue like sex work because of your personal hangups over sex work in general, and with the very real amount of exploitation and sexual violence that occurs in non-consensual sex trafficking and like slavery situations, you end up believing the right-wing framing on a subject like this one. But as far as Sesta Fossa goes, sex workers were very much against it, and it still passed. And as a consequence of that, sex work became less safe because there were plenty of websites, like I believe it was called Umbrella. Like there were services online that sex workers would use to make sure that they can communicate with one another about bad johns, about consumers of consumers of sex work that were violent and awful. And the reality is those websites had to be taken down as a consequence of this new provision. And then, boom, all of a sudden, it's a less safe environment. A lot of the negative associations with sex work is also the reason why sex workers cannot move away from that industry if they choose to do so at any given time. Sex workers don't have the same access to banking, for example, and institutions that would otherwise like allow you to live a normal life. And that actually traps women under coercive circumstances if you care about like female sex workers and male sex workers as well. But that traps sex workers into basically only picking one lane and sticking to it. So there's no way that they can get out of it, which can lead to a dangerous lane to stay on. All of this, of course, comes from decriminalizing sex work in general. And without that, you make it so much harder for sex workers to coexist peacefully in society and set up boundaries on what is permissible and what is not. Isn't unregulated sex work basically indirect rape? Let's be honest. If they had direct opportunities, they wouldn't be selling their bodies. No, this is wrong. Like, this comes from just simply not believing that this could ever happen. Okay? You're not actually thinking about the situation a little bit deeper, and you're simply saying you're thinking about the worst possible media introduction to sex work, which is like someone who's homeless, selling their body on the street in like really horrifying situations, right? You're only thinking about that person, and you're saying, well, if they had an opportunity, they wouldn't do that. And you're right, okay? But that's not the broad majority of sex work that is actually being regulated in ways that end up harming every single person that wants to consensually engage in it. Does that make sense? And it's not about unregulated sex work. It's about decriminalizing it, because criminalization is not regulation. Criminalization is the worst aspect of regulation. That's not how you regulate anything. Okay? And what percentage of all sex workers want to be sex workers is not like you. This is unfortunately very, this kind of thinking is super commonplace, but it unfortunately isn't, you're not thinking about it critically, right? Like, you have made up your mind on the subject, and now you're just kind of adding stuff in there that you simply made up. Like you're saying, what percentage of sex workers want to be sex workers? Not even 0.001%, in my opinion. A lot of this stuff could get cleared up if you simply talk to a sex worker. If you agree labor is coercive under capitalism, then you agree sex work under capitalism is rape because it is coerced? No. All labor is coercive under capitalism, but there are different levels of coercion that make something violent. It's like saying all work is technically slavery, okay? Because all labor that is done under coercive conditions is slavery. So now you're comparing prison labor, which is slavery definitionally, to someone working at McDonald's. Okay? We're playing fast and loose with we're playing fast and loose with definitions here and changing the subject matter into a very changing the subject matter from like a impassioned and very rational, very critical analysis into a passionate one that is not rational at all. Yeah. Also, I have had plenty of sex workers come on and talk about this sort of stuff. And if you would like to find out more, you can go to my YouTube. There's like plenty of conversations that I've had with sex workers, active sex workers, former sex workers in general. So, you know, if you're truly interested in hearing a different perspective. This is why I always say sex work is real work. And, of course, most people that, I guess, from a more progressive approach want to abolish sex work don't necessarily have, they hold sex to a different regard. They think sex is a different type of work, and therefore it's different. Like it's not, it should be regulated simply. And I think it comes from personal hangups towards sex, sexuality, your own personal experience with that. Now, of course, we've moved far beyond what we were talking about with respect to Twitch, right? This is far beyond that. I see a lot of people make the mistake of labeling their complaints of sex trafficking as sex work and then proceed to use that as a hammer against the profession. Yeah. This conflation is a very common one. It is inherently a reactionary conflation. It's like the conflation. Here, I'll give you a Palestine example. Anti-Zionism can be done by anti-Semites, right? Sometimes anti-Zionism can be anti-Semitism. But in the broadest sense of the concept, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, right? And the same dynamic exists for sex work, okay? Sex work is not sex slavery or sex trafficking. However, sex work is always conflated with sex trafficking. Sex work is done by adults in a consensual manner. Sex trafficking has no consent. I know a person who left retail/service work to do sex work and felt more dignity in it. Yeah, I mean, I have friends that the original brothel conversation started when one of my stripper friends posted about a Hasanabi head at their strip club wearing my merch. And I posted on Twitter, and we had fun for a brief moment until anti-sex work leftists found it, and they fucking lost their minds. And then they took one of my older videos talking about sex work, where I talk about like going to a brothel, and they used that to be like, Hassan is a rapist. He's a rapist, child sex trafficker. It also betrays the seriousness that you supposedly the seriousness of the conversation. Like if you think personally that this is the most evil thing, which I do. Right? I do feel like sex trafficking is one of the most evil things you can do, right? Then you wouldn't just like immediately fucking slap anybody doing that, anybody doing consensual sex work with like the idea that they are participating in rape and sex trafficking of children. That's insane. So yeah. How big of an issue is the sex traffic allegations for you? You talk about it often as an example, but I don't know if I see people chirp about it. No, it's not it's a ridiculous phenomena that gets brought up whenever like my name is in the media somehow. But it's not a big issue because it's a fucking ridiculous thing. The brothel still exists. This is a very famous brothel called Artemis. They've successfully sued the city of Berlin for conducting a raid and then claiming that there was sex trafficking happening in the brothel. Brothels are legalized and regulated in Germany, and they won that lawsuit. They won 2 lawsuits against the city of Berlin for defamation. So the boundaries that they try to fucking hit me on are already incorrect. But it's also ridiculous to fucking be like, oh, you went to a brothel one time in 2010 or whatever the fuck, right? And that means that like you are participating in the sex trafficking of minors. Like that's a ridiculous fucking point of contention. You would never do that. You would never do that. The only reason why you can do that is because sex work is categorized as something different than the rest of work. Right? Yeah, I was like 19 when I went. A good comparison would you rather work for McDonald's or would you rather have your own hours, work for yourself, and be an OnlyFans sex worker? Also, many sex workers feel empowered by the job? Yes. There was sex trafficking at the brothel. The lawsuit was over. The prosecutors comparing owners to Al Capone. There was sex trafficking at the brothel. It's literally on the Wikipedia page. Oh my fucking God. I'm assuming that the Wikipedia page has been modified recently as well. Not even that. There was never a claim of sex trafficking except from Twitter freaks, only tax evasion. And for that claim and those reputational damages, they were awarded $250,000 and donated all to a charity. There were never sex trafficking charges against Artemis from prosecution. It doesn't matter at the end of the day because like the only way this works is because you fucking personally believe that someone going to a fucking strip club equals, or I'll use strip club as a boundary because it's legal in America, right? If you go to a strip club and get a fucking lap dance from a stripper, and then someone says, "Oh, there's like one of the strippers was being beaten up by their pimp 20 years later," that means you beat up your stripper and you actually are participating in the beating of sex workers. That would be a ridiculous thing to put on someone. But because it's sex work is different, people can get away with making this conflation because many people don't think about it. And it's like a very unique thing for them. When Big Mike said this on Flagrant, it changed my attitude.
Pushed into doing a lot of things.
What is this?
Now, but yeah. just to bookend that. But yeah. She got
Big Mike is also another goated ass fucking pro sex work content creator as well.
Pushed into doing a lot of things.
Weird when you like actually date sex workers, you end up seeing them as full human beings, worthy of dignity, and it's really interesting to think about. But I myself was, of course, like a swerf as well. Like, at most people's starting position is like that, where you, because yes, it's kind of your fault, but not really. What? You were a swerve? Like, I had sexist ass opinions about sex workers too, for sure. It's very common. It's very common to have that perspective. It's incredibly uncommon to defend sex work, especially if you are not a sex worker yourself. And most people don't want to listen to sex workers in general because they infantilize them. The very same stripper I talked about that started the brothel controversy quite literally was bullied by the very same swerves that kept saying, "Oh, sweetie, you just don't know. You're a victim and you don't know it." The default position in a place like America is that like sex work is bad. It's across the board bad, and it's only women that engage in it, and they're doing it at the behest of men, and they're actually doing it because they are coerced into it, and it's bad. And there are elements of coercion for sure. There are elements of normal coercion that exists under capitalism, and then there's also obviously sex trafficking. Okay, problem with sex work, influencing more sex work, like that's the only way to get by. Please stop this. But again, you're not making an argument as to why it's bad. You're simply saying it's bad. It's a tautology. You're saying it's bad. and everyone agrees with me that it's bad without saying why it's bad. A lot of people who are otherwise rational, for some reason, can't see it this way. Or, yeah, it is a truism. Influencing women who thinks their body is only good for sex, not influence more nurses. That's so funny. So, you still haven't talked about why this is like why women doing sex work is a bad thing. Because I don't think women who do sex work think their body is only good for sex. You're the one who's saying that. Do you understand? If you talk to sex workers, they will tell you. One thing that, as a matter of fact, I've talked about quite a bit on this broadcast is about sex workers on this platform. Amaranth is one example that I use quite frequently. Amaranth is an incredibly successful sex worker, right? And the sex work that she does from start to finish, to start to end, is the personal, it is her allowance for you to, look at that and jerk off to it if that's what you want to do. Like that's the boundaries that she's set. But once that's over, she's just, she's a person. She's a business owner. Like, so when she talks about other stuff, for example, turning around and going, oh, well, shut the fuck up. You're a sex worker. I'm going to objectify you. I'm not going to actually treat you with dignity, which you should treat sex workers with dignity as well. But I'm saying, like, I'm going to sexualize you in an inappropriate setting is not correct. You're not supposed to do that. Actually, a lot of sex workers say they wouldn't do this if they could, but they see no better options financially. You just happen to live around and know the glamorous ones. I mean, some of the sex workers I'm talking about are not exactly doing glamorous sex work. I don't know what you mean by that. Like, these aren't like super famous people. Like my stripper friend is not famous. She just strips. And also, you just described most work, almost all work, every single type of work. You just described a job. So it always revolves around the same concept, which is it's actually different. It's actually different because it's sex. That's it. You're putting all sex workers under a huge umbrella. There's a stark difference between an OnlyFans girl and a prostitute that answers to a pimp. As a matter of fact, if you knew what you were talking about, you would recognize that there isn't. And I mean that in a negative way for the OnlyFans girls as well. Even OnlyFans, as a matter of fact, is riddled with coercive elements beyond just like someone putting a camera on and doing OnlyFans. There is a shit ton of coercion and a shit ton of, I would say, illegal stuff happening behind the scenes on the management side of OnlyFans. A lot of the wages are being withheld from the actual OnlyFans performers themselves. So you're not right on that front. And of course, the only way to deal with that is by trying to fight against the stigma surrounding this kind of thing and actually dealing with the matter as though you would with other forms of labor. And yes, sex work is a huge umbrella. There is a difference between an OnlyFans girl and a prostitute that answers to a pimp. But what you are most likely pointing to here, what you're pointing to here is a incredibly coercive component that is significantly more violent than the other thing that we're talking about, right? Withholding wages for an OnlyFans girl is not the same as like a prostitute that answers to a pimp that's beating her, that is like coerced into this and is like walking the streets. I feel like the sex work stance and your prison stance are equal in how people are unable to comprehend. It's frustrating. Yes, because when I bring this subject matter up, I am not dealing with people who are looking at this with a fresh attitude, with a new attitude, or with an open mind. I'm dealing with people's biases. It's very difficult to unwind people. I would go so far as to say it's even more. It's like another issue is like obviously transphobia, right? Like it's very, very difficult to go through this subject matter and have people comprehend it with charitability that it needs in order to change their minds. Right? That's it. Like, This person, for example, went from here. This is bad argumentation, right? Classic bad argumentation. One, he brought up unsubstantiated information that he personally made the fuck up. I talked about it. Then he said 99% of sex working is unregulated, though. Big Mike is an Obama's wife, made a joke about Michelle Obama being a man, obviously transphobic. But then he said, feels like that you're basing all of this info off of your stripper friends, Germany and Holland. Just walk into the streets of a third world country or the rest of countries in Europe. They're usually working to support an addiction that brought them to that position. You're pairing up a lot of other issues now. You're pairing up a lot of issues, a lot of other issues now on top of the sex work, and you're piling it into it to build a cohesive narrative. I never said, again, that sex trafficking is appropriate. I never said that in your fantasy world, the sex work that's happening in some Eastern European country is consensual. I'm now no longer even basing this argument off of your anecdotes that you may or may not have made up. Now I'm basing this off of what your hypotheticals might be that you made up in your mind. There is no difference between making this argument. There's no difference in this situation like looking at a cooperative corporation with a cooperative structure and a factory floor and then comparing that to, well, sweatshops exist in the third world. Or look at the Republic of Congo and the mining industry there, which means obviously all of this is bad and should not be allowed. There are obviously slaves as well. There's a difference between slave labor and the coercive conditions that subject people into doing jobs that they don't want to do. It's a spectrum, and it's not as black and white as you think it is. And sex work is no different than that as well. You just have to arrive at the conclusion that sex work is work, and it must be decriminalized, and then regulation has to exist upon the boundaries of what is permissible and what is not. But unfortunately, currently, we simply treat sex work, all sex work across the board, with not only sex trafficking, but the worst, like the most taken ass situation where someone gets kidnapped and is subjected into slavery, sex slavery. Yes, even decriminalization is not enough. It also needs to be destigmatized. Is absolutely correct. Yes. None of this matters because much sex work is illegal now. It's like saying alcohol production causes crime, so no alcohol during prohibition. Anyway, this is another one of those things that like frustrates people quite a bit when I talk about it. It's unfortunate, but I do hope that. Tell me you're white without saying you're white. Third world countries, yeah. It's unfortunate, but you know, you just got to do what you got to do on the subject matter. I'm gonna keep talking about it. A lot of shit sex workers face in the workplace are the same abuse that existed in factories and workforces before regulation was put in place. The only reason we put in a different category is the shame put upon sex workers, usually by religion, so they get ridiculed and shunned for their work on top of capitalism-based abuse. Yes. That shame and stigmatization is what causes sex workers to operate not not under the auspices of like real regulation, a real regulatory body that would protect their labor and protect their autonomy, protect their bodies in any meaningful capacity, but instead do it in dark corners, and then they are infinitely more susceptible to harm by bad actors. This is something to remember. Ultimately, the concept of a Marxist analysis still applies. Sex workers should be entitled to the means of production the same way that any worker is. The coercive nature of it is derived from the capitalist practice of ad breaks at the top of the hour. Fuck you. I think a lot of people hear you say sex work is work, but interpret it as a Jeffrey Epstein Island should be legal. Yeah, exactly. I'm a very, very much anti-Jeffrey Epstein, much more so than the average person, have done a tremendous amount of work on the Jeffrey Epstein saga, still talk about it quite regularly, and I will see a lot of swerves online that hear me shit on Jeffrey Epstein and go, Hassan is Jeffrey Epstein, which I personally think is really damaging to the discourse in general, and it actually unironically betrays the severity of the conversation if you are so fast and loose with the slapping me with that kind of fucking insane sticker. Swerfs are sex work exclusionary radical feminists. Sex work is legal in Turkey, yet there is more sex work in the U.S. despite it being illegal. To add on to that, yes. Türkiye'de bile devletin yönettiği 56 kadar genel ev var. Kapısında polis duruyor. ABD'de bu kadar illegal olması çok garip. Turkish people in the chat saying 56 brothels are operated and protected by the government. And yet it's illegal in the United States of America. How odd. It's true. Sex work is legal in Turkey and also regulated in Turkey. There are aspects of that that's bad too, for the record. That's why sex workers in America advocate for the criminalization. Dude, I saw a tweet a few months ago that said you were just left-wing Andrew Tate saying you traffic women like he does. Yeah, it's just, you have to also remember a lot of people are just like 14 online, you know what I mean? And they just have no way of approaching a subject matter, especially one that's like super serious with the dignity that it deserves or with the critical thinking that is required to understand it. Anyway, let's hear what Big Mike has.
Well, I have a question about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So she's pushed into doing these like uncomfortable things, right? Like she shows up, she thinks she's going to shoot one thing, and then they like
pull the the sheet out.
And does she have the ability to say no, or do
absolutely.
they really lean in?
So absolutely. So like they can't force it. When it comes to sex work, they're very careful. But I'm sure, I'm not sure, I'm positive that in cases with up and coming girls, the agent will be like, hey, like
this
completely completely your choice. Like you don't have to do this scene today.
Right.
But I think the client was just saying that if you don't do this scene today, like you lose the next 4 as well. And then now you're like, yo, I have to pay rent tomorrow. I have to buy food tomorrow.
And
sometimes I have to pay for my kids' food tomorrow. Like, am I justifying any of this? Am I telling, people that they should let people off the hook for their decision? Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is there's a big level of, like, if you asked her, and I hate to talk about this too much with her not being here, but like she looks at a lot of it as almost like forced sexual behavior. Like honestly, like she's like, yo, like I didn't do.
Not all labor under capitalism is the same, in my honest opinion. Things that seriously encroach on fundamental boundaries of bodily autonomy and sense of self can leave deep psychological traumas. Carrying heavy boxes in a factory is not the same as potentially enduring regular physical and emotional abuse. Yeah, famously, I'm glad that you used the carrying heavy boxes in a factory as an example, because that's famously not an industry that is heavily regulated and yet routinely creates a shit ton of emotional and physical abuse. Come on, man. I mean, I get it. You're an archaeologist, but like, come on. It also says you're a lefty on here. Like, think about it a little bit more, and you will recognize that even completely regulated, supposedly regulated industries under capitalism regularly contribute to physical and emotional abuse.
Do that with my intention. Like I didn't do that because I wanted to. I do that because my agent said, yo, if you don't do this scene, like you're not going to work tomorrow. So it's just it's really nasty. And like I said, like I'm not making an excuse for it or saying like that.
No, but I think we can all have empathy for it.
Yeah. I would hope that people would, but it's a lot to ask. And strangely, it's a lot to ask from people who also
whack off to it. Yeah, it's like Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
It's like Akash has this brilliant take on Michael Jackson. It's like the reason we believe that he's innocent is because we don't want to stop listening to the music.
Yep.
And we know we would still listen to it even if we found out that he was guilty.
Or if he was still making it. You know the dudes that are posting those pictures on my tweets, right? They're her biggest fans.
Of course.
They're her biggest fans.
They hate you.
They hate me.
I guess what I'm saying is like we don't want to believe the sinister side of the adult film industry if you're whacking off to it all the time. It's like the dairy industry. You don't want to know where that shit comes from. I just want milk.
That is a great analogy.
Just give me the milk.
I just want to have a cheeseburger. I just want to have a piece of chicken. Like I don't want to see the fucking
I don't want to know how it's
birds
made.
getting their heads.
Why are you taking questions as if people are stating facts? What do you mean? Why are you taking questions as if people are stating facts? What? I don't know what you're saying. I don't understand what your opinion is. I don't know what you're trying to say here.
It's cut off in rapid succession.
Yeah,
exactly.
Don't show me the videos, Peter. Like you're ruining it for me. I like eating these things.
I don't want to see how the sausage is made. That's the same.
He means that you take a lot of questions as statements. So many haters LARPing is 1 month subs to make you look bad. I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't think it makes me look bad. I as long as I'm like responding to this person normally, it doesn't matter what their intentions are. Sorry, bad English. Because the superstructure has deemed it a shameful thing to be paid for your body, while models in the fashion industry get the same level of exploitation and treatment and even nudity, but they don't get the stigma of sex work. Well, they sometimes do. The difference is modeling is like supposed to be a commercialized industry that has regulations, even though bad actors are supposed to be caught and dealt with. It's still not dealt with, but the way to deal with that is not by making modeling illegal. The way to deal with that is by regulating the industry to ensure bad actors are actually called out and actually and are punished. Hollywood is another industry. What is Chatter saying? That you should immediately attack the chatter that is wrong? Yeah.
Damn, this guy's good.